Start with a few words from our esteemed colleague, Michael Orlov, Director of State, Regional, Local Partnerships at the NEA. Michael, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Eric, and good to see so many familiar faces and names. I guess Happy Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday is in order. Good to be together, and maybe we can all be celebrating later after this session is over. So special thanks to NASA and to Eric for the invitation to participate in this learning session. And I won't take up too much time as I want you to hear from your SAA colleagues. America 250. America 250 seems to be everywhere these days, especially now that we've officially entered our semi-quincentennial, marking 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. This milestone invites us to reflect on 2.5 centuries of history, and we'll hear from our panel today. It has inspired an extraordinary range of local, state, regional, and national events, commemorations, educational initiatives, and celebrations. I won't talk through the entire origin story of America 250, the America 250 Commission, but as many of you know, Congress established this initiative back in 2016 with the NEA, NEH, and roughly a dozen other federal agencies serving as ex officio members from the very beginning. And I can personally attest to the many, many, many meetings and conversations, and yes, the occasional spirited argument that have taken place over the past decade to build the foundation for this milestone year. It has not been perfect, but here we are. And I do have to give a shout out to my colleagues, Aaron Whaler and Lakita Edwards, for being so engaged and involved on all things A250 over the years. Others have been involved, but Aaron and Lakita especially. What I can say is how deeply appreciative I am of the state and jurisdictional arts agencies that are stepping forward as essential partners in shaping how this historic moment is experienced across the country. Through grants, cultural programming, public art projects, and community-centered initiatives, the various state arts agencies, state A250 commissions, and many, many, many arts and humanities orgs are ensuring that the America 250 observance reflects the diversity of our local histories, elevates community voices, and fosters meaningful and lasting cultural impact. Their work is helping communities not only celebrate the past, but also imagine the future through creativity, through storytelling, and through the arts, of course. Before we hear from today's panelists about some of these efforts, I'd like to briefly share a few of our own agency's key initiatives, Eric, if that's okay. I'll start briefly with grant making and national funding initiatives. Our grants for arts projects, America 250 has been a priority going back to 2018. The NEA encouraged applications for projects that commemorate America 250, and in late October, the National Council on the Arts approved approximately 470 America 250 related projects. We are also involved through the honoring the National Guard of American Heroes. Funding offers have been made to support 50 projects across multiple disciplines that honor individuals recognized in the Garden of American Heroes initiative. Through our partnership agreements, through this incredible network of all of you, our state and jurisdictional arts agencies, the NEA is indirectly supporting an additional 1,200 America 250 related projects in communities nationwide, which is amazing. A couple national programs with America 250 focus, our musical theater songwriting challenge. Young songwriters will be invited for this cycle to create original works celebrating the vast tapestry of American stories. Of course, you all know about Poetry Out Loud. Creative Forces, in recognition of 250 years of U.S. military service, the program continues to advance the health and well-being of service members, veterans, caregivers, and their families through the arts. A couple of collaborative national initiatives, the Mayor's Institute on City Design, better known as MICD. This is in partnership with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. The NEA is inviting mayors, local arts agencies, not-for-profits, and groups to create city art posters celebrating community identity, local history, and civic pride to honor America 250. We are collaborating with the Smithsonian Folklife Festival over the course of the summer and fall. We'll be collaborating on a series of regional festivals across the country, which we'll share more information hopefully soon. And just a couple more initiatives. We're working on the Great American Road Trip with the U.S. Department of Transportation. The NEA designed and produced a co-branded souvenir passport to accompany the National Engagement Initiative, and the Great American State Fair, which will be happening on the mall over 16 days this summer. We will be developing a similar passport and also providing 16 days of arts and humanities programming for the fair's main stage. I think I will leave it there, as I want to make sure there's plenty of time for our panelists to chat, but happy to answer questions later. And Eric, it's always great to be in a room with all of our amazing SAA colleagues. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate all the work you all are doing there at the NEA and the support you're providing to us. So thank you for being here and introducing the session for us today. With that, I am going to introduce our roundtable participants who will be sharing their own projects and how they're engaging with this work. First, let me introduce David Lewis, Executive Director of the Mississippi Arts Commission. David, welcome. Next, I have Danielle Bursk, Director of Community Partnerships and Artist Services at the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Hello, Danielle. And we have Rachel Clifton, Executive Director for the Wyoming Arts Council. Welcome to all of you. So to get things started, first, I'd like to encourage all of you attendees out there watching this to respond to these questions in the chat as well. We'd love to hear from your perspective, any links you have to projects you're working on as well, and pop any questions in you have as we go, as I mentioned at the beginning. I'm going to start with you, Rachel. I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about how you're engaging with America 250 and the projects in your state.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for inviting me. And hi, good afternoon, everyone. Like Eric mentioned, I'm in Wyoming. And so I think as of last count, there were 85 separate projects happening across the state in communities large and small. I feel like Wyoming's been planning for at least a year and a half, probably 2 years. Our state legislature actually pulled together a task force that the governor's office approved. And we were fortunate enough to have one of our board members be appointed to that task force. So really out of the gate, we've had strong arts and culture support represented at that statewide level, to the point where our board member was calling and saying, you guys need to get in on this. You need to be involved, put together some proposals. And so he actually kind of helped spearhead. Wyoming's theme for the semi-quincentennial is Declaration of Imagination. So very forward focused, very creative, which is great. So all said and told, we are involved with 7 separate projects that we ourselves are either partnering with someone else, managing the budget, funding, that sort of thing. And then we've also been pretty heavily involved with the statewide celebration that's happening on July 4th in the capital city of Cheyenne. So we've been involved with booking dance groups and musicians. We're going to have some folk art demonstrations that day as well. So hoping to get several thousand people turned out to the state capitol on July 4th. So I don't know, there's a breakdown. I don't need to list off all of our projects. I'm sure we'll get into some more detail as we talk more about challenges, but everything from writing programs, engaging high schoolers through a high school art symposium, songwriting, archaeology, trying to really make sure that there's representation across the board through those different projects.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You guys are doing a lot here in Wyoming. Um, David, why don't we bring you up next and tell us a little bit about what's going on in Mississippi? You're still muted.
That's a key part of being able to present. Thank you, Eric, for having me. I'm the executive director of the Mississippi Arts Commission. In Mississippi, when there was legislation that was passed that named several directors on the commission for Mississippi, as well as several appointed names. So I serve as per that legislation on the commission alongside the directors of Visit Mississippi and the Department of Archives and History. The rest of that board is appointed by elected officials or other parties. And my role on that commission has meant that we've had a very strong influence on the programming. Of course, in Mississippi, a lot of our identity is tied to arts and culture, with a lot of very famous pop culture, literary titans, visual artists sort of being notoriously from Mississippi, and that's a lot of what our identity is about. It's tied very closely to tourism. And Visit Mississippi specifically has taken a lot of the lead of programming a lot of this, the work that's being done. And so we have helped create a lot of arts and culture focus specifically on our website. But then we will also have a presence alongside Visit Mississippi, and involvement in that National Mall event that Michael Orlov mentioned earlier. They came to us to help sort of connect with sculptors to create a work of art for that state activation site. We advised on some of the logo placement, and then, of course, we helped recruit the National Folk Festival, which has a 3-year residency here in Mississippi, the first time in the Deep South. And a part of that pitch was alignment with America 250, given that it is an expression of America's sort of cultural heartbeat, folk and traditional cultural heartbeat, sort of Mississippi being the birthplace of America's music, this being an opportunity to bring America's music back home to its birthplace for America 250. At the Arts Commission specifically, we have sort of found really creative and easy ways to tie America 250 into things we're already doing. Things as simple as we just had our Arts Week last week, and we sort of made the theme of our press conference around America 250, allowing for our grantees who are doing programming to speak at that press conference about that upcoming programming. Our advocates use their digital guide that they put out to advocates across the state, the theme being America 250 this year. We even wrote a little bit about America 250 into the governor's Arts Week proclamation for last week. And then larger, we are using the funds from the NEA. We developed a one-time public art grant. There was funding from the state legislature for America 250 Mississippi, about $2.5 million. A million of that was set aside for grants. And we wanted to, at the time that this was sort of being presented, we wanted to be a little bit more generous to our friends in the humanities. They needed some projects and some granting to be able to do, and they had some capacity given the cuts that they faced. And so they took on the bulk of granting out, even to arts programming, which a lot of the grants that have gone out are going to arts organizations. So we tailored our focus on public art. And the of that allotment, they were able to match the NEA funding 3-to-1, allowing us to grant a little over $100,000 to 10 projects that have represented all 5 regions. We just actually, right before this call, our commission met and voted to approve those projects. And then, oh, did this go blank or is it? Are we seeing? Okay, good. We also are aligning our folk life area, our state folk life area, in theme to America 250 for the National Folk Festival. We curate that area for the Folk Festival. We're going to be doing some robust documentation alongside our Archives and History Department, ensuring that arts and culture is very much represented in the way that we remember America 250 and the celebrations. And then we have been pretty robust in offering opportunities like panels and other engagement points and informational points at our state arts conferences and virtually about opportunities for communities to access grants. And so that's kind of a lot of what we've done in Mississippi.
Again, a lot of work. really like that partnership with the humanities you talked a little bit about, while still being able to kind of get out to the five regions with the public art. So, hitting it on both strides, which is not the saying, but I could not remember it as I was speaking. So, Danielle, why don't you tell us a little bit of what's
All
going on in
right.
New Jersey?
Sure. So I'm also going to share. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Danielle Bursk, and as you can see here, I do have a plan to take over the world. We cannot take over the world by ourselves, however. So, I also have this little post-it note that you see up here, which I've typed out so you don't have to read my messy writing. And essentially, our plan to take over the world here in New Jersey starts with partnerships. So these are some of our partnerships for the commemoration of the semi-quincentennial. Many of these are partnerships that we engage with all kinds of projects. We do a lot of public arts inclusion, temporary public art projects. We're lucky to have a statewide transit system here. So New Jersey Transit is our public transit system. The Port Authority operates Newark Airport. We work with them. Revolution NJ is the public-private partnership for the commemoration that our New Jersey State Historical Commission has established in the state. You can see here we're also working with Monument Lab, and that's kind of the real meaty project I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But I figured I would start with kind of the easy stuff. So our partners at New Jersey Transit are doing a high schooler bus wrap contest. We had to do nothing. We did nothing with this other than we've been talking with our partners at New Jersey Transit since 2018 about the semi-quincentennial. I call this a win because they already know we are not going to be able to help them with this. Another project that we did is we hosted our friends from Revolution NJ on a webinar in 2014. And we basically said, we've got constituents in the arts across the state. If you want to engage them in this work, we will be happy to invite them to a webinar and you can tell them about what your plans are so that they can connect work they're already doing and work that you are doing. Since January of 2024, Revolution NJ has set up a website with all kinds of events. I did real quick cut and paste. You can see here of different arts events happening throughout the state that are really pertinent to the semi-quincentennial. So I love this because we hosted a workshop once over a year ago, and it impacted so many of our grantees, able to impact the folks who can come to their programs, right? They have a space where people who might not already be on their mailing list but are interested in 250th activities can come. We have, as I said, an existing partnership with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The M on the screen is Munich Airport, who actually operates the facility. For several years now, the new Terminal A at Newark Airport has this big, beautiful digital screen over the TSA queue. Every year we work with them on a temporary art project where we have an open call for local artists to submit images of previously completed work. We run through a panel process. 20 artists are selected. They're given a $1,000 stipend to have their work up there for a year. And it rotates through along with all kinds of other messaging and trivia, but it stays up there once an hour for a nice chunk of time. There's a QR code so that folks can learn more about these artists. There's also a website for this. This year, the theme of this exhibition is 250 years of New Jersey. So that was another really easy handoff to say, we're going to do this work anyway. This work is already funded. We have established a process for this. Let's make the theme appropriate to something we're celebrating statewide. Getting into the more meaty projects, in 2018, our friends at the Historical Commission said, hey, have you heard of these guys called Monument Lab? We had. Monument Lab is doing work nationally around public monuments. They happen to be in Philadelphia, which is less than an hour from Trenton, New Jersey. We met with them in the New Jersey State House and talked about ways we could potentially partner with Monument Lab and the New Jersey Historical Commission to commemorate the semi-quincentennial. At that time, we said, well, hey, let's talk about getting started now and do some smaller, manageable, affordable projects as we build up to 2025. Unfortunately, as you can see from the dates here, things started to change pretty early in 2020 as we were getting our projects off the ground. But our first project was what we called an artistic research residency. New Jersey artists were selected through an open process. They were given a grant award to do some research and propose, if they had a budget, what kind of artistic public art engagement would they do to commemorate 250 years of New Jersey, but also to talk about underrepresented narratives. And that's really been the focus of our work with Monument Labs since. New Jersey happens to have the most Revolutionary War battle sites, so we had a lot of opportunity within our geographically small state for the artists to go and do some research. Because of the pandemic, this project got changed partway through, but the artists did very successfully do their research, and a publication was produced. It is available online if you want to take a look at it. We said, okay, well, we did that. Now here we find ourselves a year later. What can we do with what we've already learned? And we decided to actually take several of those research residencies and go deeper with them. And videos were produced with the artists, really talking about their research, their imagination, their creativity, how they came up with these ideas. And then video was actually made about the underrepresented stories they were talking about and telling. These videos are also available online. We originally tried to get New Jersey Transit to play them in transit stations, which was part of our initial push to connect with them in some way. But apparently they get a lot of money paid for advertising on those and weren't necessarily so interested in playing them for free for us. After that exciting project, we knew we were coming up on something important, and it's the semi-quincentennial. So at this point, with generous support from the NEA and $500,000 from the state of New Jersey, we invested in sort of the big project. Our big project was an open call for a New Jersey artist to propose a performance series that would be implemented with the production support of Monument Lab throughout the state. We identified 3 locations in our state, north, south, and central, which geographically reaches lots of our constituents. And they have very rich histories in those areas. And we put together a diverse committee of folks from both history and arts and local stakeholders to look at every submission. And eventually we found 2 artists who happened to be sisters, Annika Grant and Nandy Jordan, who proposed a project called Ceremony for Revolutionary Seeds, which includes both an art making workshop with a local community partner in each of the locations. And I'm sharing here a few images from their proposal, so it may or may not actually look fully like this when it's realized this fall. A tea ceremony with teas that were very particularly chosen based on the location and the history, and performances which will be done in some sort of structure like the one you're seeing here. So right now we are in the middle of, helping support those artists and doing their research and making community connections and finalizing what the actual performances are going to look like. My big takeaways are partnerships are important. I think we heard that from everybody today. We know we're not the experts in everything. Actually producing things is hard for us as a government agency. Writing checks to individuals is hard for us as a government agency. We need partners to help do those things. We also have to be clear about what matters. Working with curators is great because they know what they're talking about and they have very specialized knowledge. But for us, having a fair, open, transparent artist selection process is really important with state dollars invested. So that was something we had to bring to the table and really tell our partners how to do.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And thank you for talking a bit about your partners. I actually have a little bit of follow-up on that about how did you guys go about building those relationships? Are you kind of working towards maintaining them even after the America 250 granting? Is that something kind of on your mind with the partners?
So for us, yes, these are partnerships that are ongoing and in part of multiple projects that we do. So the Newark Airport project, when that facility was built several years ago, we worked with them for all of the arts inclusion projects there. Right now, they're building an access facility. We're doing a permanent public art installation project there. So we're always trying to keep working with these partners, especially the ones who are good and, bring their own capacity to the projects. It just was a bonus that everything aligned as far as our 250 project and these particular partners.
Have any kind of unexpected or non-traditional collaborators kind of risen up as process has been going through? Like someone you weren't expecting to be involved or that you're happy to have gotten involved, or maybe not so happy to have gotten involved?
I'll say from Mississippi, we a lot of our partnerships are, existing and ongoing, especially when it comes to our partnership with our with Visit Mississippi and our partnership with the Humanities Council. The directors and I work very closely together, and so we've had to navigate, even with Visit, we've had to navigate some dynamics with people involved in different projects and try to ensure that we kind of stay the course together on a lot of work that's being done. But I think it has only strengthened those partnerships because it's obviously a pretty, once in a lifetime kind of experience to work on something like this. And so we all kind of have the same sort of, motive to like make sure the voices, especially being statewide agencies, we all want to represent the holisticness of the state as best we can. And so kind of fighting for those corners and those little niches of various communities is something that we can kind of like pivot and sort of turn quickly together. So like, okay, humanities, you guys can reach this area if we can't get there, or Visit, you guys go do something there if we can't get there, that kind of thing. So it's been really great to collaborate, and that's really been the key to a lot of what we've done.
Thank you, David. Rachel, how about in Wyoming?
Yeah, I would echo what Danielle and David said. Existing partnerships have been crucial for us. A couple of projects, we're doing a writing contest for youth all the way to adult, and we're partnering with a statewide writing group that just has more reach than we do. They already have the structure set up to collect submissions, the judging structure, all of that kind of thing. So in those instances, it's very much how can we support, how can we put the 250 theme over top of something that they're already doing, reach a little bit of a wider audience, that sort of thing. I would say for the July 4th event that's happening in Cheyenne, one of the biggest challenges is partnering with the city, because the city has a very different and unique approach to how they want to celebrate 250th activities versus the state, which is maybe a bit more civic minded, a little more culturally focused. And so kind of finding that balance between throwing just a really great party and having some civic and educational and historical value to the events has been a bit of a challenge, from that partnership in particular. But we're working it out, and at the end of the day, it's going to be great. So
Great. Thank you, Rachel. I have a question, a little bit, kind of a backtrack a little bit about your own agencies and kind of how this work is going. So, David, I'll start with you. How's your agency aligning America 250 work with your existing strategic priorities and funding programs? Or are you kind of treating this as a standalone initiative? It didn't seem like that, but
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both and. So we didn't, we haven't like necessarily said that our regular grants have to be tailored to America 250. What we've done is encourage folks to do that and to let us know about it. We've tried to open doors and sort of communicate where there's been opportunities for them to apply for those grants led by the Humanities Council, or even new ones that the NEA has been rolling out, new opportunities to really get to them and communicate constantly with them about those things. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now, so we've seen that effort especially when we came to that press conference and were able to quickly kind of draw from grantees who like had a whole year's worth of programming put together. But then at the same time, we have had the fortune of being able to add a new position to our staff right in October, and hired a special initiatives coordinator who has been able to run that specific grant program, for example, and will be leading all of the documentation effort with this. And so having someone that is able to, for right now, focus on that during this time has also been really key to help us kind of push a little bit into some key areas that we might want to focus specifically into America 250. And we had the pleasure of being able to do that because we got the extra pin and had the capacity for that.
just a quick follow-up, David, do you foresee being able to maintain the additional employee afterwards and like shifting them to other priorities?
Yes, so it's a pin for special initiatives, but when that individual came in, we were able to just quickly attach to this so that we can get to this year, and then we'll move on from there for other initiatives.
That's great. That's great to hear. Danielle, how about you? How are you aligning America 250 work?
So I will say that the majority of our funds are 3-year operating support grants. That's a very large part of what we do. We don't have too many project-specific grants, so we didn't align our grant making around America 250 so much as we aligned with our partnership, right, with the New Jersey Historical Commission, with Revolution NJ, and tried to figure out ways we can support the work outside of our regular operating grant stream because we expect some of those organizations will do semi-quincentennial work and we'll be able to say, hey, there's a platform for sharing that, but we don't want anyone to view that as that they had to do it.
Can I ask just a quick follow-up on that as well? Is like, since you're working with your partners, did that kind of shifting the focus with them through those partnerships feel kind of authentic, just like a natural way to kind of go about it?
I would say that the partnerships at times were challenging, but not because the partnerships themselves are challenging, but because there was actually a lot of staff turnover. And, my big takeaway was kind of I ended up being the one with the historical knowledge for projects that didn't always originate within my agency. So that was something by the time we kind of are approaching our last project, it was like, well, I think we have to be in charge of this because we have that historical perspective on how we got here. So that was, staying fluid with our current partners for those projects was the challenge and maybe the takeaway too.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Rachel, how about in Wyoming? How are you aligning with your strategic priorities and funding programs?
Yeah, so I think we really looked at the 250th as an opportunity to just kind of overlap with some of what we already do. So 2025 was the 20-year anniversary of our Folk and Traditional Arts Mentoring Project grant. So we have this wealth of information. I think it's almost, approaching 200 different artists that have gotten grant funds from us over the years. And so looking at that as an opportunity to pull together a publication. Let's do a Folklife Festival in 2026 in Cheyenne when we know there's going to be attendance, when this gives us an opportunity to maybe get that message and provide that education and outreach opportunity that we wouldn't have if we just did some sort of standalone event. So really looking at it that way. Our state legislature put aside about $2 million to fund 250th activities. And so we had to apply to ourselves, essentially to the state to get grant funds to support some of this work. But again, it was an opportunity for us to reach out to current partners like we're in the same Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. We work with state parks often already. And so looking at this as a chance to say, how can we overlap the 250th themes with some of the programs we already do? So next year, or this year, I should say, we're expanding our artist in residence program. So we're going to have 18 different artist residencies in 9 different state parks all across the state. So it's really a chance for us to kind of pilot some things as well, and get some feedback along the way about what people want and what type of programming they think resonates with them. So it's really kind of an opportunity for us to try some new things and connect it back to those 250th themes.
Yeah, it sounds like all three of you are using this as a good opportunity to kind of strengthen or advance relationships, but also being able to kind of do something new and fresh and try something you may not have been able to try otherwise to kind of break out of the rut perhaps you might have been in, or at least explore new ways of doing some things. Why don't we start with you, Rachel? I have a question about kind of what are some of those challenges you've encountered, whether funding or timeline or political or so on. What are some of the big challenges you've faced?
D, all of the above. No, I think the big one really is communication, because I think there is a lot of enthusiasm for the semi-quincentennial and committees and subcommittees to the subcommittees. So whether it's an event or whether it's a program, ensuring that those lines of communication are open between grantors and the governor's office and the city, and really just making sure that we as a state arts agency don't lose our voice and our role in all of that, I think has been really important. And so staying in our lane as best we can with those partnerships and those projects that we're taking on, but then also serving in a support role and like a marketing and outreach role, because there is so much happening. Some of our grantees have gotten direct NEA grant funding for 250th activities, so we want to amplify that. So it's just the challenge of staying on top of who is doing what, and not duplicating efforts, but also being that cheerleader and that additional marketing arm for some of these other programs that are arts and culture related that we're not necessarily involved with, but that we want to help spread the word.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. David, how about you? What are some of the big challenges you've experienced through this work?
I think timeline. I think we had as Michael mentioned, there have been conversations around it since 2016, and there's been work at the national level. I think that our state commission was formed with enough time, but unfortunately, there wasn't funding set aside for it until really until June of last year, starting with the fiscal year in July of last year, which sort of got us off to the races kind of really quickly and had about one fiscal year to get projects done. So as that sort of translated into our public art grant, suddenly we realized that, okay, the timeline for them to create public art is like March 1st to June 30th, which is like impossible. And so, I think that that's just kind of like hindsight is 2020, but there was efforts to try to get that funding in place, but it doesn't always happen. And so I think time has been a really big thing, as well as visibility. I think it took a while for sort of America 250 to sort of like come into sort of like the lexicon of sort of the public, and even maybe still is. And so oftentimes we still find ourselves talking to people and they're like, what is America 250, right? And so maybe Beyonce's post from the Super Bowl will have helped that, but it remains to be seen. But I think that those are two big things, is like visibility and timeline, that have been challenges that we faced.
Thank you, David. I'll give Beyonce a call and see if we can't get a little more. Um, Danielle, how about you? What are some of the biggest challenges you have coming?
Yeah, I would agree. I think timeline has been challenging, even though we did start talking with our partners at the Historical Commission so far ago, long ago. The timeline and the funding didn't always align, and we were trying to follow their lead with this project, which might mean we were ready to rock and roll, but they didn't have the money lined up, or there wasn't a mechanism for them to release the funding in the right way. At this point, as I said, we're really funding this big last project. Um, and their staff turnover throughout the timeline was challenging. I would add, additionally, politically speaking, we had a change of administration here in New Jersey in January. So, nothing wrong with that. It happens here regularly, as it does everywhere. But it did mean, there were different people at the table in December paying a lot of attention to this than the folks who had came in January and February paying attention to this. So that, coupled with the timeline piece, made things challenging, even in terms of communication.
Great. Thank you,
Can I
Rachel. Go
can I
ahead.
add one more thing? I think, logistics aside, right, of planning and budgets and timelines, I think the one challenge that we, at least internally as a staff, have had a lot of conversation around is, Wyoming was not a state in 1776, not anywhere close to being a state in 1776. And what does that look like for our communities and some of our constituents and those underrepresented in narratives that Danielle talked about? Like, even things like using commemoration instead of celebration in our language, and just being very mindful that this is going to mean very different things for some of the folks in our state, and just how do we navigate that, and how do we invite those conversations to the table and be respectful while also moving forward with some of these state sanctioned activities that we're being tasked with, has been a challenge and something for us to be mindful of.
Thank you, Rachel. That actually, I received a chat question about how you're working with rural, tribal, historically underrepresented communities to make sure they feel included and part of this process. So I really appreciate your answering that. David, Danielle, do you have any further you want to build on that? Or Rachel, if you have anything further you'd like to build on that particular aspect?
I would just echo that we also use commemorate rather than celebrate. That's actually from our partners in the Historical Commission from the very beginning. And we do completely recognize even, some of the indigenous people in our state, might not be celebrating it so much as marking this effort. So that was a big part of our planning all the way through.
Yeah, just I would echo what both of them said. I don't have anything necessarily to add, but yeah, absolutely. Kind of being mindful to representing the whole state as best we can.
Great. Thank you all. I do have a couple of questions that have come directly to me from chat for you all. I want to encourage everyone else to send them directly to me as these individuals have, or shoot it out over the everyone, and we'll include those in. First one is kind of building a little bit on that, sort of a slightly different angle. But how are you supporting kind of contemporary voices alongside like historical interpretation? Like how are you talking about the stories that are happening now as well as like the past 200 years?
I'm happy to hop in on this one because we actually put this into some of the themes to select from for our public art grant. There were three themes, but the third one was about Mississippi's future and thinking about how do we sort of how would a community present artistic and creative new traditions or new forms of work that will help shape the nation's cultural sort of heartbeat in the future, given that we've had a role as a state. How does the work that's being done now, or what work that might be doing now, could be sort of celebrated in that way? So that was one of the themes that we baked into that grant application.
Great. Thank you, David. Rachel, Danielle. Rachel?
Yeah, we did the same thing. Three themes seems to be the trend. Yes, and the third one was kind of reimagining the future or imagining the future. And so that's being kind of using that as the framework for the writing contest, for the artist in residency, for the high school art contest category, things like that. So making sure that that is part of the conversation. I don't know that it's quite at the forefront as it could be. And then I think internally, we're definitely, like I said before, using this as an opportunity to say, okay, now what? Whether it's a program or a partnership, like how does this work live on down the road? How does this further the Arts Council's mission? How do we best continue to serve our constituents through this program?
Thank you.
I think New Jersey has more than three themes. I think there's a lot of academic folks involved in putting that together. That the themes are really published by Revolution NJ, the public-private partnership, and all of them had, much like your state's, sort of baked into it the idea of what themes are coming out of the revolution and moving forward to today. And that really has been the basis of all of the work is, what has come out of that that still today is relevant.
Thank you, Danielle. I think that actually bleeds right into this other question I have about how are you connecting, or how are you hoping to connect your America 250 efforts to civic learning, civic engagement, as you kind of think about this progress, where it's, again, not a historical thing, but an ongoing process? Don't all rush to this question.
It is a challenging one because I think it remains to be seen what lives on. But I think, we're looking ahead to strategic planning. And so using this opportunity to get feedback directly from the people that we're engaging with and with our partners of, is this beneficial? Is it not? Kind of thing. I don't know that that answers the question, but I think just being open to that feedback and not letting July 4th come and go and put it on a shelf and say we're done with this now.
David, Danielle, anything to add? David?
Yeah, I would say that I think that that's part of why we wanted to do something, even maybe in public art, because we wanted to sort of that's an area where in our state there has not been as much push of that idea, and our special initiative director has really helped us push that idea with grantees and with communities, and so it's kind of like we're still kind of stuck on the mural. And so kind of pushing beyond that, and then using this an opportunity to get into communities and to have them explore these ideas. But then I think alongside that is sort of coming alongside of it with the documentation, so that as people are looking back and seeing what was done, they see it as an example for what can be done in the future, but also using as a platform to keep doing that type of work and keep documenting that work. So even if it is a performance as public art, it still lives on in some form and sort of continues to educate the populace in new and different ways.
Thank you, David. Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. Our ongoing projects documentation will definitely be part of it because it's ephemeral, right? It's a temporary performance happening over a few days. And all of the work that our grantees and arts organizations are doing tend to be, time bound, right? It's a weekend workshop or it's an exhibition. So maintaining the documentation of it, I think, is important. And maybe circling back to where we started, maintaining the partnerships.
Thank you, Danielle. I have a couple more questions. This one I think, resonates with what you just said, David, a bit. Are you leveraging digital platforms or new media or kind of paying particular attention to those kind of avenues for these projects, like encouraging, different ways of approaching the public art, et cetera?
Yeah, we tried to be open-ended with public art and kind of help guide people in sort of thinking sort of more broadly. It has not been sort of a direct sort of charge, but we have gotten some applications in that deck that were sort of thinking beyond and thinking into different spaces that hopefully will be sort of opening the door to more of that.
Great. Thank you. Rachel, Danielle, anything you're doing related to this?
I mean, I think this touches on actually both of your questions. The last two questions is what are we preserving? And, one of the projects we're working on is an oral history and portrait project of Wyoming veterans, and that will live on in perpetuity at the State Archive. In addition, we're going to have video, we're going to have QR codes, so those family members or community members of those specific veterans can come in, scan a QR code, and hear the full oral history of that person. And so I think it's a mix of, using the technology and the media we have available, but then also preserving that information for future generations. And so it's a really nice kind of full circle moment of again taking the 250th as an opportunity to do a project that we needed some funds and we needed the inspiration to get it off the ground, and here we are, and it's something that will last for forever, arguably.
Danielle, do you have anything? Or
I don't know that I have anything to add. I think we're all pretty much on the same page with letting things live on both digitally and, in the world.
yeah, I think we were definitely circling a theme with those questions. So thank you for answering all slightly differently and nuanced the way you did. I have one final question. This kind of also talks about moving forward from this. How are you measuring impact? Are there particular ways in which you're measuring the impact these projects are having? Are particular ways in which you're going to be reporting out to constituents as to the outcomes of these events? There's just a curiosity about how that's going about. So if there's any specific things you're doing that are different or um, resonate with you. Go ahead, David.
For our grants, right now we're still kind of probably figuring that out a little bit if there's going to be anything different. Mostly we will do it based off our existing sort of final reporting mechanisms. But as we are developing that sort of documentation sort of piece with archives, I think that we'll probably have some good conversations about that. And I think too, we're leaning a lot into the form that NASA has developed with the NEA for reporting and encouraging our grantees to communicate that with us. And that's also going to influence the work that we sort of provide and the documentation that we provide for archives and history so that we can start to kind of collect and document Mississippi's sort of arch story as it relates to America 250.
Great. Thank you, David. Rachel, Danielle. Rachel. I think I saw you unmute first.
Um, I think for us, we will definitely be looking at, the success of these programs and do we want to continue them? We hired a Wyoming photographer to do all the veterans portraits. And I think he was like, there's over 40,000 veterans in Wyoming. And we're like, challenge accepted. I guess we have 39,000 and, however many veterans to still go interview. And so I think, we will gauge what lives on and we will gauge the success of some of these programs based on how we continue them and how we move them forward. The artist in residence is another one. We will get feedback from those artists and from those community members of, what was the impact of having this artist in your local state park. And so that's what we've been really focusing on, kind of the public value of these programs. So getting that input and then deciding, do we continue this? Do we change it? Was that a one-time thing? Definitely pausing and asking ourselves those questions after the fact.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Danielle.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to add. I think the normal metrics, the attendance metrics and things like that apply. But additionally, in particular for the Monument Lab work, will really be sort of what we hear from those communities about the impact of this work, because this is something different than they normally see. So that will be something interesting to take away. But I can also say I don't think we're going to do that kind of project again. Right. I do think, again, the partnerships with our existing partners we hope would live on, and this would be something we can learn from as we move into our next partnership projects together.
Thank you, Danielle. We still have a few minutes left, so I'm going to squeeze one more in. I'm going to start with you, Danielle, for this one. Is there any advice or final thoughts you'd like to share with your peers here today?
Well, I think I'm going to stick with the theme and say, finding the right partners and maintaining those partnerships is important. But also it might not be where you think it is, right? I think for, the airport, the Newark Airport is one that you wouldn't necessarily turn around and go, that's going to be a really strong partnership for me. But for us, it turns out it really is. And they can reach all kinds of folks, millions of travelers, people who aren't necessarily going to go to an art museum when they come through the city of Newark. Um, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. I'll just go reverse order from what we just did. Rachel, you're next, and then David will wrap up with you.
I would say everything Danielle said. And also, it's okay to say no, especially if you take a look and go, wow, we just don't have the capacity or the time at this point to do that, or that doesn't align with what we do at this state arts agency. It's okay to say no.
Great. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, and I'll end actually with something that Danielle said earlier, which is that she considered it a win because they didn't have to do anything. I think that when you find opportunities that are within the existing framework, this also touched on what Rachel said, of what you do, like something as simple as like I said, we do an annual proclamation with the governor. We have the opportunity and the pleasure of being able to sort of write that. So we can just like bake that language in. And that's just really easy ways that are so low. They're like high impact with like low effort for us to be able to sort of have a prominence to be able to encourage, because we know that our grantees can do this work really, really well. And they can sort of navigate some of the political nuance sort of externally from us and outside of us than if we were to try to do it ourselves. And so we know that they can go do those things really well. So we're trying to empower them with the tools to be able to take and own the story of what America 250 means and what it needs to be so that we can kind of commemorate that appropriately. So that's kind of my final thoughts.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing your expertise, your experience, your wisdom, dare I say. Um, I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And I want to thank everyone who stuck around throughout the session. I hope you got as much out of this as I did.